This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome back, everyone. We looked into the initial set of around seven uh, points to be noted when it comes to requirements elicitation. We'll continue with the next set of points right now. Okay, so as I already mentioned in the previous video, these are some things which is more like for a BA to be working along with the stakeholders. So it's more like a shared responsibility. Sorry, but you need to take care of it. Okay. The next point is about overlooking the edge cases. What does this mean? So, whenever you talk about any specific requirement, there are certain possibilities of missing out, analyzing what happens if you use a very extreme uh, side of the input. For example, when we talk about the same thing, like, the password, username and password, if we talk about that particular scenario, what happens if a customer selects just one or two characters as username and just one or two characters as password? Was this any time considered? Or what happens if if a customer uses a very different or a very unique special character as a password? Is that allowed? Now, these are some things which are actually not a general thing. These are more like exception scenarios. But still, it is always a good thing to make use of these exception scenarios and get the things sorted out. Else, what happens is there is a possibility of some loopholes in the system that is getting developed, which can be, used by hackers, and that can lead to some financial losses for the client later, and all of these things can take place. So the value add that you create as a business analyst comes into picture when you are aware or when you have come up with these points and you are making the stakeholders be aware that these are the things which they should be coming up with, or they should be concerned about, and give the required inputs to you. That is where your value comes into picture. So making use of exception scenarios, talking about those, getting those details sorted out, and then document them accordingly, that is something which you can really be considering as a good thing to follow when you get into the business analysis. Okay, so that is one thing. The next thing is the time constraint. So the time constraint can be from any angle. It could be like there's a time constraint of the stakeholders due to which the requirements elicitation could not happen properly, or there's a time constraint in the documentation process, like you were not having the right window of time frame that you needed to get the uh, documents completely, including all the details, and get the due approval in place. Or there was a time constraint when it came to development or testing. So whenever anything like this happens, it can impact the end product that is going to be delivered, right? So being aware of these time constraints, and whenever you're planning something, for example, if you are supposed to come up with the number of workshops that you want to uh, set up with the stakeholders, the meetings, uh, let's assume that five workshops are enough for you to get all the information. You should not claim that five is enough. You should keep your buffer, and you should, add one or two sessions and then talk about it, saying that, okay, I need at least seven sessions or seven workshops to be conducted so that I can get all the requirements. Why are you doing this? Because you're giving yourself that leeway that, okay, if in worst case scenario I'm not able to complete the discussion of all the requirements in five sessions, I still have a couple of sessions. And sometimes it becomes handy to you because you would be working from client location. You may not be aware of the public holidays in the client location, and you might have by mistake set up one of those five workshops on a public holiday, and later you get to know that that day is gone because it's a public holiday. Stakeholders will not be available. So here what happens is, if you have set up a buffer, it helps. Okay. So that way you need to plan things a little bit properly. And if some things can be done parallelly, do not wait for the first task to be completely over for the second task. What we mean by this is, especially when you're working in waterfall methodology, you don't have to wait till all the workshops are over for you to start creating the business requirement document. Okay. maybe a couple of workshops are over. Right from then you can start putting up a structure and start putting up the sections in the document and start filling some details, so that by the end of the workshop more than half of your BRD work is done and you're left with just a little amount of things to be filled up here and there, and that saves you a lot of time. So these are the ways in which you can work around the time constraints. Okay. And also, if uh, uh, what if the stakeholders are not available? Sometimes that can also lead to a situation where you're not getting in required details within the given set of workshops. So again, if you plan some additional workshops, that can help you. Maybe sometimes you need to plan for the interviews to be set up. So play around whatever possibilities are there to ensure that there could be time constraint, but still you are able to manage with all the requirements detailed out properly. The next point is resistance to change. This usually can be either ways, like a set of requirements or features have been discussed initially, and then uh, you take it up to the development team, and development team suggests that okay, even business wise, maybe this requirement maybe delivered in a slightly different way. Now, stakeholders may not be willing to accept that change. The other way is also possible, like requirements have been given by stakeholders, those have been documented, approved. Now, the development team is working on it, and then the stakeholders are coming up with some enhancements or some changes to those requirements. And the development team says, no, no, this leads to a lot of rework. We have to scrap everything that we have done in this feature before, and you have to rework. There's a dependency of this code on the other code. All of these sort of issues can come up. So the resistance of change can be either ways, either from the business side or from the tech side. So how do you deal with it? Maybe making sure of using the feedback of your requirements detailing, and trying to ensure that there's a proper alignment of the requirements with the tech details, so that the final product which is going to be delivered is going to be effective enough. How do you do that is, initially when the requirements are being captured itself, maybe on and off you have discussion with the tech lead of your project saying that these are the requirements and things like that, so that the technical aspect of it is also to some extent covered during your workshops itself. And later, maintaining that good rapport with the stakeholders, so that even if the development team is suggesting something, you should be in a position where you can go and negotiate and talk about it with the stakeholders and convince them, if required, about a better approach rather than what was decided and approved earlier. So this is more about your social skills coming into picture to avoid this resistance of change and ensuring, because see, at the end you are not trying to take up every change and get that implemented. You will put your thought process into it and you'll see if this change is really required to be implemented. Is it going to benefit the total product or not? And only when you feel totally convinced that yes, this is required to be changed, then you go to the respective parties and try to get the things sorted out. So that becomes the resistance to change. I mean, this is also one of the point which you need to be aware that okay, there are certain issues like this which can come up. The next point is stakeholders insisting on a specific solution. This again is a very specific scenario that I'm talking about, wherein sometimes what happens is, let's say that your clients a particular solution, which is that maybe they're using a particular dashboard or a portal or some software application internally for their employees, for example, and that uh, internal working of that tool or internal mechanism is relying on a outdated software, for example. And when they have come up with some new requirement for it, you have suggested them saying that they have to upgrade, or they have to rather change their existing software to a new system or a new competitor software or something like that. You cannot, I mean, you should not be surprised if the stakeholders say, no, no, we don't want to change anything. We want to use the same framework. We want to use the same software. We want you to just enhance this rather than requesting us to change our entire software that we have been using since 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. Now, this puts you in a dilemma because here you're suggesting them to do something, of course, based on the technical inputs from your team. You're suggesting them to go for an alternative, which can really be very helpful for the client. But they are very adamant and saying that no, we don't want to change, we want to stick to the existing software itself with some minor enhancements here and there. What do you do in this situation? So, first of all, you need to understand that okay, where are these stakeholders coming from? Why are they not willing to make these changes? They could have their own valid reasons. Maybe because changing the software would require um, more of a expense for them, which they are not ready to take up right now. Maybe that was not budgeted in this financial year. They could take it up later, but right now, no. It's a strict no from the management to spend more than this amount for this. Or it could be because their as I said, it is their internal employees, right? So their internal employees have got used to using this particular system, which has this software. Now, shifting to a new thing might require the employees also to start learning how to use this new software and all, which again may require some sort of training and all that things to take place. Okay, switching from one tech to another tech, it might not really be so easy for this client side where they have maybe like hundreds or thousands of employees. So, or there could be some other reason. So, stakeholders may have their own reasons to insist on a specific solution rather than going with what you are suggesting, which could be a little bit more beneficial to them. Okay, so in this scenario, what do you do is try to understand the root cause, and if your solution actually hits that root cause and takes care of that also, then try talking about it. And if not, and if the stakeholders are still sticking to their own point and saying that we don't want to have any changes the way you're suggesting, then deal with it. Deal with it in the sense, stick to what they want to be delivered and work accordingly. You shouldn't create a situation wherein you spoil the cordial relationship that you need to maintain with them. Okay, so if you come across a situation like this, you need to find out the root cause. If that is still not helping out, then go with what the stakeholder requires, because at the end it's their product. You need to be aware of it. It's not something which you have to live with, they have to. The next point is change in stakeholders or decision makers. This can be a little troubling actually. Now let's say that you're halfway into the project and development is in full swing, and then some of the key stakeholders of the project client side have moved out and they have got replaced with someone else. Now these new stakeholders, when they get to know that okay, there is some project or some application which is being developed, they'll be keenly interested to know how it is happening and all. They'll join, and when they see, they might come up with uh, some radical changes to be done, and you can't help it. Now they are coming with a completely fresh mindset to this particular problem, so they don't know what was the background of the discussions that have happened wherein these particular requirements have been finalized, and now they come and tell you that okay, this is not correct. Why not we do this way, so that our solution is more future ready. Now what do you do in that situation? So this can happen not just in stakeholders, sometimes at the decision maker level. Now your solution, you're going to demo it to the some CX level person after having thoroughly spent enough time on requirements and development. And these decision makers sometimes they come up with some huge request saying that this is not at all correct. I think this has to be completely removed and you need to replace with this feature, something like that. So these sort of changes in the stakeholder or the management or the decision makers at the client side can severely impact your requirements. Now, there's nothing that you can do as a BA in that, right? Because you have been discussing closely with the stakeholders and then you have really sorted out all those requirements and then it has gone into development. So it's something which is beyond your control, but that can definitely impact the project. So, how do you deal with it? This is a very tricky situation. So one thing is whenever some huge changes are being expected, you don't have to right away accept it that okay, we'll do it. The way you need to work it out is you need to see if that is something which can be managed within the given timelines. If yes, then you talk to your project manager, tech lead, your team, and then see if it can be accommodated. If that is not happening, the second thing that can happen is you need to talk to the project manager again and the project sponsor and see if there could be some sort of additional help that can be requested for. Maybe additional resources, maybe additional tools or something like that, which is required to get these things done within the given time frame. If that doesn't work also, then maybe extending the timelines of the project. Okay, so there are ways in which this can be worked out. You're not alone in this. You can always rely on the project manager whenever such things happen, but be aware that if there is something like this, that there is something like this possible to happen in a project. Okay. The next thing is about stakeholders having conflicting priorities. This we touched upon earlier, wherein I gave an example, I think, of a marketing and finance stakeholder having conflicting priorities. So if something like that happens, what do you do? Is you don't take a side. You don't say that yes, yes, I agree with what this stakeholder is saying. I think the other stakeholder might have to, sit down. You can't take that call, okay? Because it's the stakeholders. You are supposed to capture the requirements. You're supposed to facilitate the process, not be the decision maker in the process. So we discussed a little bit on this earlier also. How do you resolve it is try to diffuse the situation at that point of time. Don't let that discussion go beyond a certain point, which can lead to increase in conflict between the stakeholders about that specific feature or requirement. Uh, Switch over to the next topic, get the details sorted out, and then talk one to one with these stakeholders to understand the requirement better. Where are they coming from? Why do they stress on that specific way of getting it done? Those things. Talk to the project sponsor and get their buy-in. You might be totally convinced that okay, one stakeholder is correct and the other one is totally wrong, but you are not supposed to let it be known. So how do you do it is you talk to the project sponsor and let that project sponsor take a call and then put that in writing saying that you'll say that you'll ask that project sponsor to respond over mail about this particular thing and they'll respond saying that yeah, let's go with this option. That's a safer approach. Okay. Or you talk to your project manager, and if it is still not getting resolved, then sometimes you'll have some steer co, which is like nothing but steering committees meeting. In that, if required, you'll pull out this point and say that this needs to be resolved because it is impacting the other requirements, and then get that discussed at that level. So there are different ways in which you can try to handle. The point is that you should be aware that there is a possibility of something like this happening, and you should be prepared for it instead of flummoxed when it happens. Okay, there are still a couple of more things that you need to be aware of, so we'll cover that in the next video. Thanks everyone.